So I wanted to do a little bit of wrap up here today with the Nintendo Direct now finished and us having a good idea as to what Nintendo has planned for, I would say, a majority or at least a good portion of 2023, and why things just got very interesting for the future of Nintendo, especially with Nintendo Switch Online. So we're going to go over all of that here today. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe down below if you're new. So the current release lineup that we have in front of us for Nintendo, we have Kirby coming up here soon for February. Of course, this after Metroid Prime Remaster just kind of dropped on us out of nowhere, which very exciting stuff. But you have that, and then you have Kirby kind of rounding out February. Then we get into March with Bayonetta, the Bayonetta Origins game, Advanced Wars, which was delayed from last year, making its way into April, so that full 1 year delay. Then the big title for the year, Nintendo, The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, and then we jump to July with Pikmin 4. Throughout the year, there will be DLC that'll be ongoing for Mario Kart, Xenoblade, and Fire Emblem, to name a majority of them there. And the last big game that we really know about now that hasn't been dated or really shown at all since it had to be rebooted, and that's Metroid Prime 4. I don't believe that's going to be holiday 2023. I actually think that is going to end up in 2024, and could even end up as a cross-generation game. So we'll see with that one. But at this time, it does appear indeed that The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom is the big swan song game for the current platform Nintendo has with the Switch. Now, in a recent interview, Nintendo did say that they have other titles that will be announced for the Switch. So they're not like completely moving on after Tears of the Kingdom or Pikmin 4 really being the last release that we have dated at this time. And I think E3 time, June, like, I know Sony, Nintendo, and Microsoft are not being part of E3 officially with some sort of floor space for Nintendo, but I think they'll still kind of take advantage of their typical time slot for a Direct in June, and I feel like they could show a 2D Mario game, maybe a 2.5D Donkey Kong game that's been rumored, F-Zero GX, that could be shown there, a Mario Baseball, why not get all the different sports games for the Mario series on the Switch to wrap that up with baseball. But basically, I don't think outside of Metroid Prime 4, they're going to show up with some other like massive release that's on that level. I think at this time, Nintendo, and it's pretty clear based on what we've seen with this Direct, which they didn't really reveal anything too new necessarily, like Metroid Prime Remastered, sure. And there were a lot of third-party things there, especially with Level 5. But Nintendo started with Pikmin 4, which we already knew about, and ended with The Legend of Zelda Tears of the Kingdom, which we already knew about. So they didn't necessarily show up with the Direct to have a bunch of new titles being shown off, more or less to reinforce their current ones, because most likely a lot of their larger internal teams are already developing for their next generation platform. Which does make me think that either by the end of this year, so leading up to the holiday, or to start off 2024, we will not only start to hear rumblings of their next generation device, potentially from like outlets doing reports and rumors and leaks and all of these things, but Nintendo themselves maybe just dropping a trailer similar to what they did with the Switch and the rooftop parties, just to give us an idea as to the concept of the system, and then maybe introduce it fully like they did with a live stream where they had an actual event take place outside of a pre-recorded Direct. Which, hey, that's exciting stuff. Always fun to see what weird, wacky, and zany idea Nintendo comes up with, especially if it is vastly different from their current system. I'm still hoping that it's just a better Switch, essentially, right? Just figure out some of the shortcomings of it and build on the platform. They already have. That way, we'll have full backwards compatibility. For most backwards compatibility. All right, Labo might not work. Oh, no. But, like, for the most part, 98% of games work. And you have your cartridges, you pop them in, and sure, maybe it runs them the same, but maybe it also runs them a bit better if there's an unlocked frame rate. That's most of what I'm crossing my fingers hoping for. But it's Nintendo, so you never really know with them. But along with those games in the Direct, we did have an update for Nintendo Switch Online. I think this is very interesting for the future of Nintendo, because they did show us Game Boy and Game Boy Advance, and there's a lot of excitement around this. I am excited because really the library for these systems, and I'm going to say Game Boy Advance in particular, I mean, there's a lot of potential here. Will Nintendo tap into that? Well, we'll see. And I think some of it will come down to them being able to secure kind of the licensing with different third parties for some of the games that I put on my list here. But when they launched it, which they did, they shadow dropped this as well, just went right into Nintendo Switch Online. So the basic tier got Game Boy, and then their expansion pack got Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. And they started off pretty strong. I will say that. They had like Mario and the 6 gold coins, Wario Land thrown in there. Then we had Zelda Minish Cap, Mario and Luigi Superstar. We had Mario Kart Advance, which isn't a great Mario Kart. I mean, it was fun for nostalgia's sake to throw it up on the TV here, and it looks very crunchy. And the controls, it's like it's on ice. It was really cool at the time when it released because it was a handheld version of Mario Kart. It's like, wow, this is actually a thing. But now you can just play Mario Kart 8 Deluxe on the same system. So this is definitely a call to nostalgia. But still, really fun to have these games. And they went above and beyond with some of the options. Love the different filters. Game Boy Pocket, Game Boy Color. You can kind of add like the pixelation sort of to us. It looks very similar to a Game Boy Color screen. These are filters we've had with emulators for a long time, but still to have it in an official setting. And there are a lot of people who don't necessarily want to deal with emulators, specifically the mainstream public out there who are just like, oh, cool, I can play Game Boy and Game Boy Advanced on my Switch. Great. That's more or less something I think is just an added benefit to Nintendo Switch Online, which I think at this time is going to be, it's going to be undergoing a bit of a revamp as we get into the next platform. Not that they'll be taking away games or messing around with it too much. I think the fact that this is a subscription service where you don't actually own any of these games, right? It's just part of your yearly fee of $20 or $50 will enable them to more or less bring these emulators and ROMs over to the new platform that will still, I'm sure, be ARM, and NVIDIA will be figuring all that stuff out on the hardware side. But I think they'll revamp it to more or less be one portal or icon that you go to and just has everything there. They already kind of do that. There's like a Nintendo Switch Online app at the bottom left. I just don't really think anyone uses it because it's slow and it's clunky. And instead, we would rather just have 5 or 6 different icons taking up our home screen right now of all these different systems. I think that's something Nintendo, while they do recognize because they give us a little application, needs to work to more or less streamline a bit better into one app and environment. And I do believe this is something Nintendo will do for a couple of different reasons. One, there's been rumors around transfer pack compatibility, and I have reason to believe that that is going to be a thing. Part of this plays into the idea of Pokemon games being there, and this is a question a lot of people had. Why did you launch Game Boy and Game Boy Advance with no Pokemon games? Well, I think the Pokemon company, maybe they want to make that announcement, and Pokemon Day is coming up. I've just put it out there. It's possible that maybe they put red, blue, and green or yellow or just something into the Nintendo Switch Online apps later this month. It's just, again, just a possibility, but I think that's something that would fall more in line with being part of a Pokemon Direct as opposed to being part of a general Nintendo Direct. Although they did show the Pokemon trading card game for upcoming titles, so who knows? I mean, some of the upcoming titles they have look good. Oracle of Ages and Seasons, of course, being there alongside of that. Then on the Game Boy Advance side, you got Fire Emblem, you got Golden Suns. There's some pretty good stuff to look forward to here. But of course, that going along with the transfer pack would be pretty cool because you have Pokemon Stadium, and then you can have your different Pokemon from the Game Boy, it jumping back and forth. That'd be pretty fun to have it. And then it also opens up for other titles, which, yes, I did make a list. So I'm just going to go through some of these different titles here very quickly. Metroid Fusion, Zero Mission. Why not just round out all the 2D Metroid games that you can on the platform? I mean, they're just about all there, right? So why not make the Switch the definitive place to experience some of the best 2D Metroidvania games, right? Then you have Perfect Dark. I would love to see them get together with Rare and just try to make this a possibility along with Microsoft to have Perfect Dark on the Nintendo 64 app and then Perfect Dark on the Game Boy, because you can have transfer pack compatibility, but also this is a Game Boy game that does support Rumble. So again, just an interesting touch there. Legacy of Goku. I know there's a lot of licensing there. It's that pie in the sky dream to have all the different Legacy of Goku games, Boost Fury and such, just as part of this application, it would be fun to have some Dragon Ball stuff in there. Metal Gear Solid. This game is very rare, and that's one of the things I would like to see Nintendo work to figure out, is getting more of these rare titles that are, if you want to go official means unattainable, you can just emulate them and stuff. And the market is basically telling you to do that with some of the pricing, but it'd be fun to have that inclusion here. Ninja 5-0, another one from Konami for the Game Boy Advance. Incredibly rare, but it'd be cool to just drop that in there and have people who have never heard of it try it out for the first time. And then I mentioned all the Pokemon games, but like, we got to put Pokemon Pinball in there, right? That's another game that had Rumble, so you could play that into the Switch for its HD Rumble, and you could also tilt if you kept moving the board around a bit. It'd be kind of fun if they played that into the gyro on the Switch, where you're trying to like move it around and stuff. Just some fun things they could do there. But Pokemon Pinball, very underrated games on the Game Boy and on the Game Boy Advance. So it'd be fun to see those just kind of get dropped in there alongside of some of these other titles. But the biggest thing here is this potentially could be Nintendo's doorway to bringing Mother 3 to the West. And I know what you're thinking. That, look, they've avoided it this long. Why would they do it now? Well, technically, they're not actually putting Mother 3 onto their eShop. It's just a benefit for Nintendo Switch Online. Look, Nintendo's been very hesitant about Mother 3 and bringing it to the West. There have been talks and rumors that there is a translated ROM of this ready to go at Nintendo of America, and they've obviously been trying to avoid starting a bunch of controversy around the Nintendo brand, but I think this is a way they kind of just push it out the door on the Nintendo Switch Online, not actually sell it on their eShop, and just be an added benefit, and something that would probably get more and more people looking into Nintendo Switch Online, because that would be a legitimately big deal that would make headlines. But I wouldn't worry too much about Game Boy and Game Boy Advance getting announced really towards the end of the Switch's current life, as this is more of a Nintendo account system announcement as opposed to a Nintendo Switch announcement. I think what you're seeing here with all of these different applications will follow people to the next platform. And in fact, I think it'll be more streamlined there with its own application. So it's very exciting, the future here with Game Boy and Game Boy Advance. And while we have an idea as to some of the titles upcoming, as they showed us like 4 or 5 for each one, I think when we get beyond that, it'll get really exciting and really interesting as to what they'll be able to pull from some very vast libraries. Also, I will give Nintendo credit for NSO when it comes to the content side. While they're still severely lacking when it comes to features, especially communication through messaging and native voice chat, they definitely had to go a bit further than I think most people were expecting with the offering for these different legacy games and systems. And for the most part, I think they've done that very well here with Game Boy and Game Boy Advance now being added in. For $50 a year, the amount of titles and content you get, that paired with the DLC, I understand why people are starting to come around on Nintendo Switch Online. So here's hoping Nintendo, I guess it's going to be with their next system maybe, can figure out native voice chat. Maybe they integrate Discord in. And in fact, that would probably be the direction I'd point them in at this time, because they are very concerned, hesitant, worried about allowing strangers to communicate to each other with their own services that they create. But if you let people have just an application with Discord, well, you can kind of push that off and say, well, that's Discord's problem, not ours. But at this point, I'm very intrigued to see how Nintendo handles the next 12 to, we'll say, 18 months, right? So heading into next year. So this time next year, do you think we will know what Nintendo's next concept and the next platform is? You think we'll be sitting here in the middle of February 2024 still trying to figure out what's going on with Nintendo? Are they launching a new system this year? But let me know what you think about that one down below. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.